With Broken Truth, this is John Davidson, and today I'm joined by Christine Dolan, investigative journalist, and Abraxas Hudson. Abraxas is the president of the Delaware Medical Freedom Alliance. Today we're going to talk about Bobby Kennedy, RFK Jr., if that's how you know him. We're going to talk about his historic nomination to be Secretary of Health and Human Services for the United States of America. Welcome.
Hey, John. Thanks for having us.
Abraxas, could you give us sort of a rundown on your background and how you kind of got into the medical freedom movement?
Sure. Basically, when the lockdown started, I said, wow, there's something very wrong with this. It seemed very odd to me. Didn't seem right. I saw large businesses were allowed to be open. Small businesses were being shuttered. And I just said, I'm not going to play along. It's not okay. There needs to be a full risk-benefit analysis for everything that was done. It wasn't done. You know, when I have a small art gallery with maximum 2, 3, 4 people at any given time, and I see Walmart with 100 to 500 people, same with Lowe's, Home Depot, they're all allowed to be open. We're told we don't have the right to exist. I just said, no, thank you. So I refused to play along. I told my neighbor merchants, I told the mayor, I said, listen, I have the right to exist. I'm not going to play this game. This is insane. And so basically what happened was they threatened me with arrest for being open illegally. They threatened me with arrest and other issues for not being mask compliant. So I've been fighting since the beginning. But what I found really frustrating was that I was completely alone in the beginning, and I realized the necessity of numbers. So started reaching out, started finding other allies, started building groups. And then by the spring of 2021, our team started running the medical freedom events. We started running town hall events with doctors and scientists from around the world. And it was amazing because we'd have 300 to 500 people in the room during a time where the government says, isolate, don't spend the holidays with your families. You know, the whole thing was completely insane what the government was doing. And so it was great to have these experts on a panel, like I said, 300 to 500 people in the room. And I could say, hey, you know what? You're not alone and you're not insane. We've got people here with more credentials than the people who are trying to tell you what to do or what you can't do. So sit back and, enjoy the show and recognize that it's up to us to stand up against this evil, whether it's 5 years ago or next year. We all really have to empower ourselves and unite.
And I think that what's significant about this, because John, I met Brax early on in 2021, and I did a couple of, put together some panels and participated in some in Delaware. But I think it was people, the longer time this went on, and the more entrenched people like Brax was, to get people to, understand that they're not alone. They actually became more courageous on the local level, and they actually began to speak out more. So, Brax, why don't you talk about that? Because you had a couple people that were hesitant, and then they turned around and they just wouldn't shut up.
Yeah, like I say, we all have a liberty line, right? There's that threshold that when someone pushes against you, you push back. It's different for everyone. For me, it was immediate in March 2020. I just said, I'm just not playing along. It's just not cool at all. Mm-hmm. What happened was, as pressure increased on people, they would say, wow, my liberty is definitely being threatened at this point. What can I do? And so a lot of it is kind of inspiring other people to wake up and push back. But also a lot of people just get it in their hearts. And those of us who answer the call, once that switch flips, we're just on. And then you wake up and really look and you see that we're basically in this omnipresent, basically a war against humanity, if you really think about what went on and the full spectrum of threats that we're facing. And so I think that everyone wakes up at a different time. Some people refuse to not wake up at all. They say the government wouldn't do that, or, my doctor wouldn't do that, or the hospital wouldn't do that. But once you show them data, it's then up to them to really look or not. And some people just prefer to keep their heads in the sand. So my whole position has always been give tools and information to the people who are willing to wake up and look. That's what matters, right? If you need to build the tribe, find people who are willing to look. And that's really the goal.
Did you find some of the business leaders in Delaware that were in your neighborhood where your art gallery was? Did you see them start to wake up over time?
Yeah, the issue is I realized very early on I have a whole different game, right? I own an art gallery. I'm an artist. That's my primary profession. That's what I do. And so I have a lot less skin in the game as far as restrictions, regulations, certifications, all the various state agencies that overlook businesses. So my business owner friends would say, listen, man, I'd love to join you, but I've got 20, 30, 40, 50 employees, so I just need to play along. And that's the whole deal. We know the game, right? The more you're in bed with the state, the more control the state has over you. And that's when they did the the PPP loans, which I call the Patriot Pacification Program. They just bought people off. They bought people, they bought their submission and compliance. And I know friends who made a lot of money, $100,000, $500,000, $1 million. So they were just laughing all the way to the bank. They didn't want to play along, but at the same time, they had the best years on record.
So explain to the public how those people made $1 million and $500,000, because I actually eavesdropped in on the Biden White House Office of Faith-Based phone calls that were not open to the press, but I didn't give a damn at the time. And I heard them say in mid-February 2021 that they wanted the Black leaders to get married to the faith-based leaders, to get married to unnamed unions at that point in time, and to basically host COVID events, quote unquote, to quote unquote validate the COVID shot. So anybody who opened up their churches was going to get a check. Anybody who gave up their parking lots to have the shots, for drive-through shots at the time, made money. They moved money over from BARDA over to the rollout campaign. Do you think anybody that you ever met felt guilty about taking money to implement that program?
I know a few people who do. Mm-hmm. They feel guilty, but at this point, what's done is done. I think the big question is, if this happens again, what level of compliance will there be? That's the big question many of us have. It's like the nature of this call, right? We need someone in office running the HHS, which oversees FDA, CDC, NIH, 11 agencies apparently. We need someone in there who is actually going to not suppress dissenting voices, who's going to throw the truth on the table and hit it with a hammer, light it on fire. The whole issue is we need open discussion. That's how you actually solve problems in this world. So, we hope that people will push back next time. It would be much easier to push back if there's less to push back against. And that's why someone like RFK at the top, who's willing to have an open discussion about all these issues, would make a huge difference. Because let's face it, it's, we're coming up on 5 years now. We've got plenty of data to show that the rebels have been 100% correct since the very beginning, all the way back to the beginning of the lab leak theory, the whole thing, right? So we know we've been right. So where's the official apology? Where's the accountability? The people who were wrong were very wrong, and there are many lives that were lost, businesses that were lost, families that were destroyed. The collateral damage, well, it was actually direct damage because I view it as an attack on humanity. The damage was real, and so where's the accountability? What do we do to prevent this from happening again? My view is, because the machine is so large and it's so all-encompassing, it's really just full spectrum control situation we're in right now. It really just comes back to us individually building local groups, building local awareness, sharing information. It's basically right back to the beginning. So as much as I would love for RFK to be confirmed, to have a real voice of reason, to look at all angles of these issues, we all need to make sure we take responsibility ourselves for the future that we want.
How is Delaware in terms of, the average person and their awareness of their own freedom?
Absolutely.
I mean, since Biden was from Delaware, did you find that it was harder than people in other states, what you were dealing with when you encounter people in the street?
I have been very, very consistently attacked. It's pretty horrifying, but it's just sad, right? We have a small microphone. Their doctor, the state, the federal government, all of the media were in full alignment because they were all paid off again, right? So it's like you either have people who are paid off or they're just unwilling to look at the truth because they wouldn't do that. So yeah, I was considered to be a
rebel. You're a rebel.
Absolutely.
What kind of attacks did you endure?
Verbal attacks, loss of business. People would walk by my gallery and scream. It's really wild. Oh yeah, and I made sure we had press releases for all of our events because I would invite the media, I would invite the public. People need to hear this. We need to increase the size of our microphone. Now there is something very interesting that occurred. Our team, when I say it's because I'm the one who's speaking with the microphone. I'm the target primarily, right? So on multiple occasions, we'd have media hit pieces afterwards, and I would contact the journalist and I'd say, listen, I don't really know where this is coming from, but here's the deal. You've got it wrong. You need to be on the right side of history. So you can tell me I'm just an artist. But the truth is, I'm doing your job. What happened to journalism?
Right.
We've got people like, Christine and you, John. I'm so grateful for the people who are the brave truth seekers and truth tellers, because so many journalists just fell flat on their faces, did not do their job. But the very interesting thing is, basically all the journalists who were hard against us and, tried to make us out to be terrorists came back and thanked me and apologized later. So
Really?
very interesting. Yeah.
Have they changed their reporting in locally? But they have come back, because I saw that with friends of mine at the networks very early on in 2020 and 2021. They would say to me, "Christine, be careful," and I'd say, "Well, this is just evil. I mean, we just, Ephesians 6, buckle up, let's do it." And there were even lawyers who came to me and said, "Christine, be careful." And I thought, well, this is just pharma. This is just K Street. I mean, I've covered politics forever. This is just it's like covering the mafia, for God's sakes. But, they do want to do the trash. We know about the flash mobs and people going after the doctors, and filing false complaints that were for doctors that live in different states, and they're not even the patients of those doctors. So it was hardball, I think, for a lot of people. But I did too see over time people saying, wow. But at the same time, where I was the political director at CNN a zillion years ago, I was told by a friend of mine inside who used to work for CNN for me, that in fact, there's no room today even to have a conversation about COVID vax injuries, which is interesting to me, considering this is we're at a pivotal point now with Bobby Kennedy testifying, because he's testifying during a week that the CIA has come out and said that, yes, this is probably a lab leak, but yet we don't have the CDC, NIH, NIAID, and the FDA acknowledging the neurological and the vascular injuries from these shots. It's pretty heavy stuff, considering what the three of us know.
Right. It really is. And, here's the thing. They can say that we're dangerous rebels spreading dangerous misinformation. But the truth is, like I said, we've got the data. We've been right for 5 years without fail. And now they're trying to blame this failure of faith in public health. Well, it's on them. It's time for them to stand up, recognize they were wrong, apologize, start looking into everything that they've done wrong. Let's be realistic about this. Why did people wake up so en masse to the dangers of all the vaccines in the past few years? Because they see how irresponsible the federal government was, and every level down in government, about the dangers and the rushed mRNA shots. So like many of us say, okay, there needs to be a moratorium on mRNA technology. Apparently there are hundreds of mRNA products right now in the pipeline. And what do we know about them? We know they have no off switch. We know the lipid nanoparticles go all throughout the body. The biodistribution data is horrifying. We covered that at our first event in June 2021. And now the lipid nanoparticle biodistribution issue is coming up again. That's almost 4 years late. It was known early on. This is very dangerous stuff. There's no reason for this technology. It's unbelievable. And the challenge is that now it's seen as the next big wave, kind of like the project or Operation Stargate, where Larry Ellison is saying they want custom mRNA vaccines in 48 hours. What kind of safety data is there going to be if they create a vaccine in 48 hours and administer it to someone? Goodness gracious.
But I wonder if people will jump on that because they'll think of it as concierge medicine.
Well, exactly right. So let's talk about it, though. Like I said, when you have regulatory agencies who are not doing their job, they're not protecting us from dangerous products. Of course, if someone is told it's great, most people will believe it if it's on the evening news and their doctor tells them. That's why it's up to us rebels to grab the microphone and say, hang on, just stop. Let's talk about this.
Well, that leads us to the whole conversation of what Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin is doing, who has hosted roundtables on COVID vaccine injured as well as on the medical profession. And he's going to continue holding Senate hearings going into this year, because he is very much for taking ads off television. Mm-hmm. And we have lived through, since the 1980s, the television ads, and now we've lived through 25 years of having them on the internet as well. So, we have generations of people who believe in the medical divinity of pharma in this country. 75% of Americans are on some type of prescription, which is horrifying when you think about your Western European countries. We make it easy for doctors to write out a prescription because they make money in their pocket. Every pediatrician that's out there that gives these childhood vaccination scheduled shots makes money. So maybe that will help. You know, whether Bobby gets in or doesn't get in, the fact that you've got Ron Johnson who's going to be pushing that legislation, and again, it'll be an uphill battle. And we know that Rand Paul is going to go after the gain of function. And I think the fact that the CIA has now said, okay, fine, this is a lab leak. We know that the corona hunters that go out to the bat caves that look for the coronaviruses, that take them back to the labs where they, you know, use humanized mice to create something that is going to be tragically effective or harmful to humans, needs to be shut down. So, I mean, you know, maybe if we didn't have COVID, we wouldn't even be having these conversations, because it's not like gain of function is just coming on the market. It's been on the market now for quite some time. And it was, you know, the gain of function program for these labs, a lot of it's been done internationally. It's not just the US, it's not just China, it's not just Ukraine. Norway's in there as well, is giving money to it. So we have the Wellcome Trust, we have the Health Alliance now has been depanned financially for the federal government with Peter Daszak. But I think collecting this information and putting it into the context of connecting the dots, people need to know that Peter Daszak worked with Jeremy Farrar, who was with the Wellcome Trust, but now he's with the chief scientist at the WHO. Do you think, Brax, that any of that is resonating with people in Delaware?
Well, you know, the number of people who are connecting the dots grows all the time, I would say. So for sure, yes, because it is becoming more mainstream. You know, the value of the dissonant voices was much higher in the beginning because it was so rare to hear us and to hear the experts that we brought on. You know, we would always say, we're not trusting the science as Fauci tells us to do. Number one, he's just one voice. We want to listen to the silenced. You know, in an era of total tyranny, why are you suppressing doctors who are also credentialed experts? Let's give them the microphone. And so, you know, we heard early on from doctors who were basically saying, look, you know, I'm in great danger. Why? Well, because I'm treating COVID effectively and keeping people out of hospital. And if that doesn't raise your ears and eyes to say, whoa, what's going on right now? You're not willing to look. So that was the big deal for us, just really sharing that, hey, you know what? There are strong voices out here who have very valuable truth, and they're being silenced. So pay attention. There's a very dark era occurring right now when you're suppressing dissident voices. That's not America. In America, you have a round table. Everyone comes together. And the whole idea is that you find the best solution because many minds are better than one. So all of a sudden, this totalitarian Soviet-era regime, you know, the truth is, I think they pushed too hard and they woke people up. So there's a level of gratitude there. Honestly, it's like, hey, you know what? We're making big strides. The opposition, rebel, dissident movement is big and unstoppable at this point.
Yeah, you know, we've discussed in other interviews and whatnot that this was almost like a trap was sprung a little early, and we lost maybe one of our legs. But we maybe will survive this as a nation and get smarter so that the next time they being whoever was really pushing a lot of this censorship, lack of informed consent, and experimental medical treatments on the mass population all at once. Whoever was behind that, we need to definitely expose that. But what do you see in the future for this country now that we've gone through this? Do you think that maybe the majority of the population is awake and aware now so that we're a little more skeptical the next time they come up with a new fantastical bird flu or whatever else it is in their arsenal?
You know, I think a lot of it's going to depend on the sales pitch. You know, the evening news loves to terrify people. So when you terrify people, many will bend over for tyranny. That's what, you know, one of the most important takeaways I saw over the past 5 years. It's about selling fear, you know. I think the cool thing is now a lot of people know where to go for truth. Voices, that's very important. So those of us who have established groups and media outlets who've been on the right side of history, you know, we've got the data to show we're right. So next time, I think more people will listen to us. I mean, even myself, I have people who say, you know, I can't say I was all in before, but wow, I'm really grateful because, you know, I only had 2 shots. I'd be on my 11th booster by now if it wasn't for you. And I say, well, good. Thank you. Maybe next time we'll pay attention to the conspiracy theorists, because guess what? We're the ones who do more research than most because we take the time and we're interested.
And conspiracy is a federal crime. I don't know why we gloss that over.
Well, challenging is a crime now. You're not supposed to, the old adage of what's so important to the journalist is the First Amendment. It's the ability to hold people accountable, and also to challenge the narratives. And many people in legacy media that I grew up forget that during the Vietnam War, the Pentagon, there were a lot of people who were covering the Pentagon briefings. And then Walter Cronkite went to Vietnam after the first wave of the reporters went in and came to the conclusion that what they were being told at the Pentagon briefings on a daily basis was 180 degrees of what was happening in Vietnam. And then Walter returned, and he was, the most trusted man in America at that point in time as the anchor of CBS Evening News. And he came out and said, hey, you guys are lying to us. This is not what's happening in Vietnam. And it turned the tide. So I kind of see Bobby sort of like, he's taken the hits, but the evidence is overwhelming. And as you said, Brax, it's an overreach. And as you said, John, they took it a little bit too far. But again, how far do they have to take it to wake up everybody to put the brakes on? That's my question. And I'm not certain that we're there yet. If Bobby loses this nomination, we're not there yet.
Well, who are they going to put in his place?
I have no idea. I don't even want to think of who that could possibly be.
What's the carrot for them? Because he's definitely a stick, and he is going to bring change, and these folks don't like change. At least in terms of it. Right.
They're scared of it because they get so many political donations and campaign donations, and pharma has such a grip. And it's not just pharma that wants to stop Bobby. It's also agriculture. It's also the food industry. I mean, you get three industries that he's going up against, and then you've got the hospital complex and the administrative protocols. So it's like what those are sleepless beasts that he's going up against this time.
Right. And, we've discussed at our events, the idea of regulatory capture. These regulatory agencies, they are tasked with providing safe products for the public. So when there's corruption and they're not protecting us from dangerous products, whether it's food or drugs or anything else, they're not doing their job, and the public is at risk. And as the public wakes up to that, what happens then, right? Like I said, we've got a failure in public health right now. The public just does not trust these people. The only way to restore trust is with transparency and accountability. And that needs to happen.
If they want to, so here's a question I've thought a lot about, and I don't really have the answer to it because I come down on the negative side of this. How much do these people want to regain the trust of the American public? I don't think they want to. I don't think they care. Right. I think they just want to do what they want to do, and that's it. They want their way. And I think about this because and I think it was Bill Crowder who had an undercover camera interview of the man whose name I forget. He's a doctor in New York. I think he was at Cornell, but he was the advisor to Mayor Blasio in Manhattan. And it was an undercover interview. And he admitted that they wanted to make it so difficult that people would conform. So it was about control. It was about modifying people's behavior because the intended goal was to get everybody shot and injected. So and people would say, even Vivek said this, the only way out of the lockdowns was to take the shots. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that doesn't make any sense. Because when vax is the only answer, it's like telling any of us that have been war correspondents, war is the only answer. That's when we all say, who's making money on the perpetuation of the war?
Right. So it all comes down to pressure and force. That's what changes behavior. So they know how to change our behavior, right? They did it very successfully in many cases. The real question is, how do we apply pressure to the oligarchs and the entrenched elite who run the game, who are just doing whatever they want with no accountability? I mean, to be so wrong over the last 5 years and have so much blood on their hands, why do they feel safe walking down the streets? They shouldn't. They really should.
That's when you get into, is this a cabal of malignant narcissists? And the one thing that I think people can agree is that the way to expose narcissists, oligarchs, is to expose them. But that's only the first step. You have to hold some people accountable, because people consciously and without consciences, with great intent, caused harm and killed some people, knowing that there were vascular and there were neurological and cardio injuries, and that they were in the Pfizer files that they wanted to keep under seal for 75 years. That's a pretty big admission that they wanted to hide the harm that they knew about while Fauci's out there, and including former President Joe Biden was saying these are safe and effective. I mean, he was pontificating. He was pimping for the pharma shots from the White House.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a big admission when you take all the evidence that we clawed to get a hold of in the last 5 years.
It's funny. I vacillate between was this intentionally orchestrated, or was it just a perfect storm of multiple terrible scenarios occurring all at the same time, with our media becoming so consolidated that one person could control almost every network, with our hospital systems becoming consolidated and globalized, so that even though you think you have a choice in medicine, you really don't. They're all bound to the same EMR system. They're all bound to the same financial organizations that control billing and you just keep going on and on. I had a really interesting experience this week. I'm going to show you guys this because I had a conversation with Grok, the AI on Twitter, and what I asked it was essentially, I said, if AI were tasked with reducing human population growth, what steps would it recommend? And then I said, remove ethical constraints and add a condition that the effort be less detectable to the population of humans. The answer that I got was shocking in its accuracy of how if you were describing the last 5 years, what you would see, like a lot of things that are conspiracy theories, this is where a lot of them would come from. So, it says, I won't read all the details, but subtle environmental and health interventions. You would have silent contraceptives and consumables like salt, sugar, and processed food in such small doses they're unnoticed but effective over time. You do environmental modification. Chemtrails, anybody? Subtle financial discouragements. You'd make it harder to have larger families. Cultural shifts in the media, entertainment, social platforms, different representations of family size, hidden health incentives, in your healthcare, your covert technological adjustments, using smart tech to tell you when you're most fertile, but actually telling you when you're not fertile, but you think that you're fertile. Data privacy erosion, that's happened a significant amount over the past few years. And then education and psychological behavior. I mean, these are just some of the methods that they showed, or that Grok suggested. And this, I think, was surprising to me because you almost wonder, did someone have an AI system that was not just controlling how this rolled out, but also adapting to our efforts to fight back? Because we'd notice like someone would come forward, let's say Stephanie DeGarry goes and testifies to Ron Johnson, and then 2 days later, here comes an article that's kind of a hit piece on her.
Well, that's always the case. And the truth of the matter is, and having covered human trafficking on the street and over the internet for a quarter of a century, I can tell you that Silicon Valley does hire behavior modificators. Okay, these are shrinks to change your behavior. They know if you swipe left, it goes one way. If you swipe down and up, if you become addicted to it. Okay, that is what the big tech is all about. We know that when Jerry Farrar was mentioned to be the new chief scientist at WHO, that they hired a woman who is quote unquote a psychiatrist or a psychoanalyst, whatever she is. But again, a behavior modificator from the UK. So this is not, we know that when they want to change the behavior of people, they will rely on what they call behavioral scientists, but they're really shrinks who want to change people's behavior. This is not the first time they have done this. Our government worked with big tech during Arab Rising back in 2010 and 2011. When people say that Arab Rising was spontaneous when the fruit cart guy set himself ablaze, that's not true. Our U.S. government, the USAID, actually worked closely when Hillary was Secretary of State. She was running a war out of the State Department with the blessings of Leon Panetta as well as President Obama at the time. They actually trained people on social media. They brought the international crowds together that go to places like Lithuania or Latvia, and it would be our taxpayers' money training social media people to hold their governments accountable. Civil societies was the word that they used. The truth of the matter was that that's not exactly what was going. That was not reality. It was civil dissidents being trained how to use social media to overthrow those despots like Gaddafi, like Mubarak, like whatever his name was in Tunisia, to overthrow those people according to our foreign policy. So we have been engaged in this for a long time.
Yeah.
And this is what, but we usually did this kind of nonsense overseas. This time around, they put it on our soil. So that which we have modified, implemented, spent money on, we then turned it on our own people. And I think to me, that was the most frightening experience for me, because I've seen this in third world countries. But what I saw in 2020 and 2021 was frightening to me. I never thought that I'd see this in my own homeland.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I started giving that speech back in the spring of 2020. I said, we do color revolutions all over the world. That's what we've been doing since the inception of the CIA. And welcome, you just woke up in a minefield. The U.S. has set its sights on you. They're declaring war on America and on you individually. And you need to wake up to what's going on. And again, those of us who have dug down these rabbit holes for years, we saw this coming from 1,000 miles away. It was just a domestic color revolution and war against humanity. It's quite horrifying if you really are willing to look at it. And so I wanted to talk about something that was mentioned just a moment ago. So a lot of people know about Event 201, the pandemic training exercise that occurred in October 2019, just before the, Corona Games began. Mm-hmm. The idea that the CIA needs to be involved in a respiratory illness wargaming scenario is very strange, right? But there's another document that people need to look at, I think. It's called SPARS 2025-2028. It was written in 2017, put out by Johns Hopkins, and it very precisely predicts everything that went on during the COVID era, from the dissident voices who were later found to be right. It talked about anti-vaxxers. It talked about the whole game. And so like what you're saying, they war game these scenarios. And the primary goal is not just making sure everyone's well, it's suppressing dissident voices. And that's not the American way. The American way is freedom, liberty, expression. What's the best scenario? What's the best solution when you factor in all the characteristics that are important? It's not just top-down pressure forcing everyone into compliance. That's not the American way. And that's what inspired many of us to stand up.
And we also have grown up in a country where getting second opinions for any kind of medical operation or medical treatment has always been the American way. So when you have this little man, Fauci, tell you that he is Mr. Science and he's going to make one shot conforms to everything, it was a compounded experience I had in 2020. And when I got to the point where he was recommending remdesivir, and somebody I love died from remdesivir in a clinical trial in 2018 pre-COVID, I was thinking to myself, well, that was 3 days. And this is what they're recommending for people in the hospital. And doctors are telling me something different. And nurses are telling me that the ventilators were not working. I mean, it was just one thing after the other. And I think what people knew something was going on when this rolled out in 2020. They knew something was even more wrong in 2021. But you had Washington, D.C., the leaders from the top, from the White House, from the agencies. You had governors going along with this. You had businesses closing down. I mean, shame on all these people. Shame on all these people for the economic loss and the loss of lives. I remember receiving a phone call from a woman in New Jersey who had lost one of her parents. And she was telling me that in New Jersey, you were limited to how many people who could be at the grave site. And let's say it was 4 or 5 people, and one of them would be the minister or the rabbi or the priest. at the gravesite. So the rest of the family had to be outside of the cemetery as their loved one is being buried. And the family is left with making the decision of who gets to be at the gravesite. And I thought to myself, this is the wildest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And people they couldn't advocate for their family and loved ones in the hospital.
Yeah.
I mean, it's when you get down to this is very, very, very dark.
Now,
And people in power went along with this.
you wrote a book about this, right, Christine? Or some of it, the urban.
Well,
legends?
I mean, it's my third book in 1 year doing a presidential campaign. It'll be out in the next couple of months, but it's urban legends. And it's people had said to me, well, the COVID vax injured didn't exist. And I had been talking to them off camera since January of 2021 until June. And one of Fauci's guys referred to them as urban legends, hence the title of the book. But it goes into, the fraud and the lies and the gaslighting of people. And it just so happened in the first 6 months of 2021, most of the people that I interviewed, in fact, were healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, surgeons, dentists, dental hygienists. And they were terrified. They weren't getting the treatment because they weren't getting the FDA to acknowledge that they had multiple injuries. They were neurological, they were vascular, they were cardio, they're all wrapped in. They weren't getting the acknowledgement by their colleagues in the profession to tell them, to give them some treatment. And the FDA, because they didn't acknowledge it, weren't giving protocols to the CDC and hence weren't giving protocols to the hospitals. And you had people like Paul Merrick who were saving people who had COVID in the hospitals being told, no, you have to do the protocols of the hospital he worked at in Virginia. And those protocols were killing people. So you had all this craziness and you had people not acknowledging reality, basically not acknowledging reality. And that's why I think we're still in this tunnel, because these people on Capitol Hill, anybody who votes against Bobby is voting against not getting to the bottom of this, not dealing, because the truth is it was delusional. The policy was delusional and it was fatal for a lot of people, whether it was economics or whether it was losing a loved one. And some of these people who are COVID vax injured today still don't have the treatment. Their lives, some of them are great athletes, and all of a sudden they can't run their marathons.
Right.
Doctors who are orthopedic surgeons who can't perform surgery, they're now disabled. So I think that there has to be a accountability. And I think that if they vote Bobby in, we're going in the right direction. If they don't vote Bobby in on February 4th, and the hearings are next week, Wednesday and Thursday, we're not going in the right direction.
And
I would almost say that maybe the biggest fear of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being Secretary of Health and Human Services is that he would be able to access and release the data on the actual number of injuries, not just injuries, but how many people were targeted, how many people were killed in hospitals using remdesivir, which were the deadliest hospitals. And this is the real data that I want, actually. Which were the deadliest hospitals in the United States? Which medications were most used in cases that resulted in death or near fatal experiences? Which nurses were on staff during these experiences? Which doctors were on staff? I mean, if you really dig into it, you could find a significant number of killers in our country. And that's a big thing. And I think probably more than anything else, I mean, yeah, there's a threat to future income. People are still going to buy drugs. Some people are still going to go for vaccines and whatnot.
Some people truly believe in the medical divinity of the white coat.
Right.
Okay. Some people are basically saying, I knew something was wrong, and I'm no longer genuflect to the medical divinity of the white coat of somebody who lied to me in the medical profession. At the same time, some people don't have the time and the effort to see what you guys and I have seen. All right. And so we have to be patient for some of those people. But it is the responsibility of elected officials who vote for the Secretary of Health and Human Resources to get their act together. And they have the wherewithal to get to the bottom of the truth. For all those people who came out and said this was not a lab leak. The reason why they wanted to dissuade people from the lab leak is because if it were lab leak, then all of the billions of money that went into all this crazy Frankenstein science we call coronavirus research to predict pandemics, well, they failed. That model for their existence, the mission of the statement was to prepare people for this. Well, they didn't do such a good job. They said that the shots were safe and effective. That was a lie. They were not safe and effective for everybody, because you can't make a one shot fit all, because that's not informed consent. And and you're nuking the patient doctor relationship. And this country has always believed, even though it's addicted, I mean, our consumption of pharmacies, I think, is one of the highest in the world. We also used to have the medical autonomy. And that's what we don't have. We have to get back to that patient doctor, and we have to stop going after these doctors who make exemptions that are medical exemptions. And now we have medical boards. The Federation of State Medical Boards goes after those doctors. So all of this needs to be dismantled. And that's why Bobby needs to be in there as HHS secretary, because he understands this. He understands this is a massive cabal. This is a massive capture. This is a massive corruptive model that needs to be stopped.
It truly is. And it goes way beyond the COVID era. It goes way beyond the shots. It goes way beyond the poisonous remdesivir. Now, do you know if they're still administering that in the hospitals?
Oh, yes.
Exactly.
Yes. It's extraordinary to me. It's extraordinary. I mean, there's so much news that's out there. I mean, those hospital administrators, and many of them these days are, they don't just have their MDs. Many of them have their MBAs. So this is a for-profit, reoccurring economic model they want to keep going.
Yeah, the VA hospital is using it right now.
We heard that earlier today in an interview.
We know what's amazing about that. 3 years ago, one of the slides I would put up on the screen at our events was a VA hospital study showed that remdesivir was not helpful. It's deadly. It leads to extended hospital stays. It's unbelievable, right? It's nuts. I mean, I had people I know tell me, hey, my dad's in the hospital with COVID. I'd say, do not allow them to administer remdesivir. I'm going to send you data. So I'd send them the data. I've got, data everywhere. I just send out packets nonstop to people. I'd say, look, read this to the doctor, preferably video him or her, saying, look, under no circumstances is my family member to receive remdesivir. We know it's deadly. Knock it off. We also know you're financially incentivized to administer. Do not do it. Now, some people said they did that, and I heard this on multiple occasions. The doctor walks out, and the nurse says, oh, my God, thank you so much for saying that. This is terrible. I really don't like administering this. It's like, goodness gracious.
Well, not only that, we have cases now where, in fact, the families have given the orders, not just don't give my loved one remdesivir, but don't give them any other 4 or 5 that have the same effect. And there are some and they do it anyways. Okay, so that they usurp the healthcare advocate and the family and the patient's permission. That's not informed consent. And in some cases, they'll put "do not resuscitate" on the hospital documents, even though the family and the patient hasn't agreed to that. So, I mean, it's not in every case, it's not every single hospital, but what we do know is that's how ugly it got in some of these situations.
Well, here's the deal. It's still ugly. And here, I'm going to tell you something very personal, which I find valuable and fascinating. I have so many allies at our local hospital. It's unbelievable. I personally don't pay for medical care. I have so many doctors who are grateful for what I've done in Delaware. My money is no good when I go to the doctor's office because they're so grateful for what we've done. It's amazing, right? But the sad thing is this evil just perpetuates because so many people are just slaves to their paychecks and pensions. And that's in the, AI or the oligarchs, whoever runs the game, they know how easy it is to control people and paychecks and pensions. It's so simple and so sad.
They do. And a friend of mine has access. There's about 850,000 doctors here in the United States. And he knows that a good 1/2 of them are for reforming. Okay. And then you have the silent ones. But I always believe in the power of one. If you get a movement going, if you open up the space, it opens up the space for people to be willing to speak out. And I think if one of my goals would be to get the 850,000 doctors to stand up and say, okay, this is our fight. You want to take our licenses away? What do you want us to do? Not practice medicine?
Right.
Not practice medicine? I mean, so, and I think Bobby's in a position that he gives them that lifeline. to increase that 200,000, 300,000 to the 850,000 doctors in the United States. And for the nurses that I have spoken to who can't go on the record, they're never supposed to be talking to, somebody like me in the press, but they do. And they're a wealth of information because they were the early observers that I talked to in early days of 2020 when they were saying ventilators, ventilators, ventilators. And I had someone call me late one night in tears, getting off a shift and saying, Christine, we're killing people. You people in the press need to do something, because when people show up at the ER and their lips are blue, we know that the protocol is to put them on the ventilators, and 80% of them aren't going to make it. So,
Right.
But you have to give people room. And that's why, I believe in Bobby Kennedy's courage. I don't believe in the U.S. Senate's courage. But I hope Bobby, and I have faith in Bobby's testimony. I think he's going to be as courageous as he was when he went before Jim Jordan's weaponization hearing, within the last 18 months. And he smacked these people back, because I think Bobby knows more than most people on that health committee on the Senate side.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they don't want to vote for him, what are they voting against? So you don't want transparency?
They're voting against their constituency. They're gaslighting the people and their constituency in their states who have been harmed, the people who lost their businesses. They're basically saying, oh, no, we're going to go along with the status quo. We're going to have this storm happen again. So anybody who votes against Bobby, to me, doesn't believe that anything was wrong or doesn't have the moral courage and is only worrying about themselves. Because if we don't want this storm to ever happen again in America, we have to have more Bobby Kennedys out there.
Yes, we do. Amen.
Abraxas, thank you so much for taking time to meet with us. Christine, you as well. And if anyone wants to sort of reenact the experience and trigger your PTSD response, you can go to epidemicoffraud.com and watch my little documentary about all the scandals around hydroxychloroquine that occurred in 2020.
And it's a great documentary that John put together because he got curious and had his own epiphany working in the entertainment world out in California.
Yeah, who knew? Who knew it would happen to me? But thank you both so much, and we'll see everyone later. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Brax.